Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this evening's webinar, One Healthier State and 49 to Go, How to Bring G6PD Deficiency Testing to Every State Across the Nation. My name is Regina Phillips-Munster, and I am the Secretary of the G6PD Deficiency Foundation. In case you're wondering, I'm wearing my little pullover. As the Secretary of the G6PD Deficiency Foundation, and on behalf of the entire G6PD Deficiency Foundation Board, we're truly delighted to be able to bring this webinar to all of you and to anyone with whom you share it after this evening. I have the privilege of introducing tonight's speakers. First, let me introduce Keely Harris. Keely is the president of the G6PD Deficiency Foundation. She's the reason why I'm here. I could tell you all that later. During her segment, Keely will describe the current state of G6PD deficiency testing for newborns across the United States. It's a very interesting and a seminal point, which I think you will all find. So thank you, Keely, and she'll be back shortly. Next, if I may, I will introduce Jeff Gio. He is a partner with Millennial Strategies and has a wealth of experience with lobbying and advocacy. Jeff's presentation will address advocacy and lobbying for a G6PD deficiency newborn screening bill, which I will tell you, he did incredibly effectively in the state of New York, which is why we're able to be here tonight. And thanks for joining us, Jeff. We're looking forward to listening to your presentation. Finally, if I may, let me introduce Niloofar Darbari Narendran. In addition to her extensive professional experience in transformation management, Niloofar is a founding member of a global G6PD COVID-19 task force. During her segment, Niloofar will speak about the creation of a nationwide committee to advocate for G6PD deficiency newborn screening, something that is truly critical as we push forward with G6PD testing across the nation. And thank you for joining us. We're really looking forward to hearing from you. So without further ado, if I may turn it over to Keely Harris. But before I do so, I wanted to let all of you in attendance know that as we continue with the presentation, and at the conclusion of the presentation, we'll have a question and answer session. So as you identify questions you would like answered, please use the chat mechanism at the bottom of your screen, type the question in, and it will come to me. At the conclusion of all of the speakers' presentations, I will then pose the questions of our panelists, and hopefully we'll be able to give you all the answers you're seeking, or at least to send you in the right direction. So now I should say, without further ado, may I turn it over to Keely.
Hi, everyone. I'm Keely Harris, and welcome to this really very important webinar. I really want to thank all those who have registered to see this webinar. It's really going to be very informative. I wanted to explain what's happening in USA when it comes to G6PD deficiency newborn screening. In 2019, a few of the board members, including myself, went down to Louisiana at an American Academy of Pediatrics big seminar. And it was this symposium of so many pediatricians there from all over the world. And we set up a booth there just to tell people we're here. We have this foundation, and our goal is to educate, bring out awareness, and also to do something about screening for G6PD deficiency. What we found out in that fall of 2019 changed our whole way of thinking of what has to be done. So many pediatricians from all over the world came to visit the booth, and they were so shocked that United States did not have a universal G6 PD deficiency newborn screening panel for this particular enzyme deficiency. Their countries had it, why didn't we? So it really brought forth us to really, we had to do something about this. So next slide, please. So the question was, what? USA does not have universally screened for G6 PD deficiency? What's going on here? And we've investigated and we have found out that there are some things going on in the United States for this newborn screening, but not much. First thing we found out was that there were certain areas in the United States, in the Philadelphia area, the Washington, D.C. areas, they're screening for G6 PD deficiency for newborns. In Pennsylvania, testing is based on the ethnicity of the newborn and it only screens for the G6PD DNA variant. In fact, it's a DNA test. This type of test will take at least 7 to 10 days for results, and it cannot provide accurate deficiency levels of the enzyme. And then in Washington, D.C., they screen all newborns quantitatively with a turnaround time around 5 days. And then parents are notified by mail within 48 hours of receiving a positive G6 PD screening. So then again, and that's over 7 days before anybody would know this child has G6 PD deficiency. So both protocols are limiting their usefulness during this high-risk early neonatal period. If you recall, the reason why we are pushing for newborn screening for G6 PD deficiency is because a child or a newborn that is born and has this enzyme deficiency, they are more vulnerable for within 24 to 72 hours, that window of creating an event of extreme hyperbilirubinemia, and usually they're at home. They have already been discharged from the hospital. So this really is a step, a positive step, but it is not a step that could prevent what actually happened to my own grandson. So I am proud to say, come this June 22nd of 2022, New York State will implement newborn screening for G6 PD deficiency. Yay! This is great news. The problem is there's still work to be done, but I'm taking this as this is the right direction, and I'm very excited. Next slide, please. Okay, so this particular slide is just showing you what Wadsworth Center is. Wadsworth Center is the place where all the newborn screening tests are being done. But anyway, this slip of paper with all little dots of blood will go to Wadsworth, and within a turnaround, probably within a week, all those things that were being tested that are on the panel in New York for screening for newborns will have results. Okay, that's wonderful. What is going on with our particular screening for this enzyme, I'll explain it to you right now. This is actually on their website, and this is what's on their fact sheet for the providers, who are the medical doctors who will be informed in how to actually set up a protocol to screen for G6 PD deficiency. It says, this is the New York State mandate, so this should be followed. Newborn screening is mandated in New York State by public health sections, so on and so on. And it was just changed in this year. The statute was amended to add G6 PD deficiency to the list of newborn screening conditions in New York. G6 PD deficiency was not added to the panel of conditions screened by the newborn screening program through testing of the dried blood spots. So exactly what I was saying, this is something separate. This is not going to go to Wadsworth Center to be tested. Instead, the law only requires newborns to be given a diagnostic test for G6PD deficiency if these are the criterions. And you could see the list here: present with hemolytic anemia, if the newborn is present with hemolytic jaundice, present with early onset of increasing neonatal jaundice persisting beyond the first week of life. And then they, looking at the nanogram, it is whether it's 40th percentile in the age in hours. This is really medical terms in what the doctor should be doing and when to test. Whether they are readmitted or admitted to the hospital for jaundice following discharge. So usually the child goes home, and if they get extremely jaundiced, they go back to the hospital. This is saying that's when you should be testing them as well. The last bullet here has a familial, says that if the newborn has a familial racial and ethnic risk of G6PD deficiency, which is usually African, Asian, Mediterranean, or Middle Eastern ancestry. If they have any of that, they should definitely be tested, while they're in the hospital before they're released to go home. The interesting thing, it says newborns and infants who meet any of these above criterions must be tested for G6PD deficiency using a quantitative test. Yay! Oh, they're almost there. We got still a little more work to do, but this is wonderful news. And the situation is that they have sent this out to numerous pediatricians, telling them to get ready for June 22nd. And they have been bombarded with questions because this is a very vague kind of protocol when a physician is looking at this and really understands what happens with G6PD deficiency. And also there are other things that can cause hemolytic anemia and so on and so on and so on. And then there's a lot of pediatricians that really don't understand actually what G6PD deficiency means and how it does affect a newborn. So we are working together with Wadsworth Center, and we're getting the best doctors out there to put their input in exactly how this protocol should be put about. So within a couple of, within the week, I hope this will change on their website and it will be a little more precise. And next slide, please. Well, okay, so you're just talking about states. What about all of the United States? Why isn't there something out there where people can, where different states follow rules from the whole United States? And there is a newborn screening panel that does just that. And that is called the Recommended Uniform Screening Panel. And it's usually abbreviated RUSP. I'll read this out to you. It's on the website. The RUSP is a list of disorders that the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services recommends for states to screen as part of their state universal newborn screening programs. It's a process that consists of disorders on the RUSP are chosen based on evidence that it supports the potential net benefits of screening, the ability to state to screen for the disorder, and the availability of effective treatments, which G6PD deficiency fits all. It recommends that every newborn be screened for all disorders on the RUSP. Most states screen for the majority of the disorders on the RUSP. Newer conditions are still in the process of adoption. Some states are also screens even additional disorders, such as New York, because G6PD deficiency is not on this panel. I know it has been approached in many years ago, and it has yet to be again approached. I'm not sure, I shouldn't say that. Maybe somebody's working on it right now. But then to do this, you have to have a nomination. So the nomination of a condition for inclusion in the uniform screening panel is not an easy task. It is crazy what they ask, but at the same time, it's not unreachable. You can go to that website if you want, if you're interested in learning more about this, because the foundation will eventually get to this part, and I'll explain this to you now. Please, next slide. We are taking baby steps. And I'm not trying to make this a pun, but it's truly what we have to do. We need more states to add G6PD deficiency screening to their newborn panel, and then the RUSP will be reachable. We need to prove to them how important this screening is and how states are doing it anyway. As you can see here, 2022, New York State amended the newborn screening list and added G6PD deficiency to it as a screening condition to be tested following certain criteria. The next step we got to take is to push for New York State to add G6PD to their universal screening list. So all newborns in New York are screened before discharge. There is no doubt sometimes a child will slip through the cracks, and this is the best way to do it, is to really screen every baby. And then one healthier state and 49 more to go. We definitely need more states to do this, to help us. And then we could be there. We could make this really happen. So I hope this kind of gives you an idea of where we're at with the foundation. And I'm going to give you back to Reggie. Thank you.
Keely, thank you. I think it's critically important that everybody understand New York State is the only state where G6PD deficiency testing is now mandatory as of the end of June of this year. And I must tell you that this happened in large part because of the work of our next speaker. Jeff worked tirelessly over years with us to get this accomplished. And I'm delighted to turn it over to Jeff so he can speak to you about the work he did to really move this to a bill and from a bill into a law. So Jeff, if I may turn it over to you. Delighted.
You may. Good evening, everybody. So I really appreciate that wonderful introduction from Reggie and from Keely. My name is Jeff Guillot. I'm a partner at Millennial Strategies. We are a New York-based government affairs firm. We have an office on Long Island and in Manhattan, and we are very quickly increasing our presence throughout the United States as well. But by way of background, I was a staffer on Capitol Hill and in the New York State legislature before I joined the private sector. And my firm is about to celebrate its 10th anniversary, amazingly enough. Also joining me in this call is our Chief of Staff, Jenny Kate Schlegel, who worked side by side with me through this entire process. I certainly wouldn't have got there without her as well. So I'll walk you through some slides talking about specifically what we did and the process of how to lobby for a bill and how to create change like this can be replicated using a pretty similar formula in every state, although every states have different rules and different session calendars and things like that. The process of moving this on the federal level, to Keely's point, cannot be done without further state intervention. And so we're very interested in talking to folks from around the country who are thinking about doing this in their respective states, because we're going to need a diverse cohort of these in order to be able to make this federally legal. Next slide. So when we were initially hired by the G6PD Foundation, we took a look at this issue, and the way I look at almost every advocacy issue is you have a problem, you have a solution, and then there's an action. And we realized, that we needed to make the case that there should be universal screening for G6PD in New York State, but just based solely upon the fact that the WHO mandates that if a disease is present in 3% of newborns, you should screen for it. G6PD is far more prevalent than that. And as a result, we had to take action here. So what we initially did was we took a look at the state's landscape and looked at which members of the state legislature had the knowledge base and had the capacity to be able to both work with us on drafting, creating, and ultimately passing a bill that would do this. We were fortunate enough in New York to be able to team up initially with Assemblyman Richard Godfrey, a Democrat from Manhattan, who happens to be retiring at the end of this year, who is the chair of the New York State Assembly's Health Committee, and then Senator Gustavo Rivera from the Bronx, who chairs the New York State Senate's Health Committee. Both were willing to take meetings with us. They're folks who we had established previous relationships with, and we came in there armed with an arsenal of facts and data, explaining to them why this was so important, and why New York State should be the first state in the nation to screen for G6PD. And Keely and Reggie and our team made such a compelling argument that we were able to get both committee chairs to be able to introduce the bill, which is really, really not an easy task. But there's just such a wealth of empirical data to indicate that states should do this, that it simply could not be ignored. And that argument will be compelling in every state in the union. So we did these introductory meetings, and then our journey began. Next slide, please. We continue to meet with key elected officials on this in both houses of the legislature, as well as we very early on went to the New York State Department of Health and said, hey, this is what we're looking to do. This is what we're about to ask the legislature to do. This is where we think this can go, and this is why we should do it. The New York State Department of Health did in fact meet with us, and we informed them of our progress every step of the way with this thing. Now, sometime over last summer, we were sent a bill draft from Assemblymember Godfrey's office that did everything we wanted it to do, and then the journey really began. And then we knew that we had to launch a full court press on the state legislature to, one, educate them about an issue that almost nobody knew about, and two, stress why it was so important to move this bill through the legislature immediately. Next slide, please. So we were able to attract not just sponsors and co-sponsors to this bill while we were going through the process. And most importantly, and this is something anyone who's looking to do this in their state needs to be cognizant of, not only do the various committees that these bills have to ultimately be referenced to, but also the staff that run these committees, they look at two things. They look at, one, who's sponsoring or co-sponsoring the bill. So as my slide indicates, we reached out to folks not just to carry the bill, but also to add their name to the bill as a supporter, but also really mission critical. One thing that the foundation did an incredible job of, and I take almost no credit for this, was collecting what are called memos of support for the bill. We were able to furnish the legislature with over 20 memorandums of support from physicians, from physicians groups, from pediatric groups, all of whom were all based in New York, and all of them saying in one emphatic voice, New York State needs to do this. The cost to the state of one kid slipping through the cracks and getting connectorus or something else due to G6PD, it is worth the cost the state would bear to implement a program. And numerous doctors from around the state, experts in newborn pediatrics, came out and said exactly that, that the state will lose ultimately if they don't do this. And then furthermore, we were also able to make the argument to next slide, please, to the legislature that there was a social justice element to this. Disproportionate amount of the kids that are affected by G6PD are of African, Middle Eastern, and Mediterranean descent, and that doing this is going to provide an extra safeguard for folks from minority populations, and that certainly helps selling a bill like this in a Democratic legislature. So we ended up getting assigned to the Health Committee. We were able to pretty easily move through the Health Committee because, again, the chairs of both committees were able to move those bills forward. That's not going to be the case in every state. We seem to just get lucky there. But then, just to take everyone back to the Schoolhouse Rock part of this, once the bill ended up in committee, it then had to move through the committee process. So we had to ultimately get not just through the health committee, but also we ended up in the finance committee in the Senate because there was a fiscal impact to the bill. So that's just another layer where you have to engage the chair and with committee staff and make your case as to why this bill deserves to move forward. And we met with legislators at every step along the way, and we kept presenting the same massive amount of displaying the same massive amount of support for this thing, and just showed all the empirical data that made it crystal clear that we have to do this. And I'm really proud of the fact that not just did we pass this bill, but this bill received 0 votes in the negative. It passed the Senate 63-0. It passed the Assembly 150-0. Getting 63 members of the New York State Senate to agree on the color of the sky, or that ice cream is good, is incredibly difficult. But yet, there is unilateral agreement based upon the data we presented that the state had to take this action and had to take it now. Continue. Next slide, please. And so 2 days before Christmas, on December the 23rd, Governor Kathy Hochul signed our bill. We were able to effectively engage the press on this. Newsday did a couple of stories highlighting the foundation's journey, as did a couple of other papers around the state, explaining that this was really a big deal. One of the most important things that we always tell our clients when it comes to legislative stuff is not to let perfect be the enemy of the good. We shot for universal screening. We came in a little bit short. The State Department of Health wasn't quite ready to get there. But we still were able to do a comprehensive first in the nation bill that at the end of the day is going to save a lot of lives. And the one thing that I certainly stress to the folks on this call, and we always stress, is that government can move exceptionally slowly. It can be a meticulous, grueling process, but at the end of the day, when you do something like this, it is exceptionally worth it, and all the waiting and all the work becomes worth it. We stand ready to help the foundation in any way possible in moving this bill and any of the other 49 states where there is an interest and where there are people out there who can work to build the same level of grassroots and grass top support that Keely and Reggie and the gang were able to build here in New York. I think this is an issue that is nonpartisan. It is based in an empirical fact, and there is no state in the union that should not want to take this action and screen universally for G6PD.
There's absolutely no doubt, Jeff. I mean, and I do have to say one thing that Jeff omitted, which I'm going to bring up because in my other role, I'm a lawyer. He had a huge hiccup, 2 of them. We were in the middle of COVID, and we sort of lost a governor in there. And he navigated that issue very beautifully for us. So you can imagine New York gets its fangs out as often as it can, and there were a couple coming out, and yet here we are, and Jeff had the unilateral vote in the Senate and in the Assembly, which was remarkable. And we thank you for all of your efforts. So thank you.
Usually the state legislature only gives unanimous votes to bills that name post offices and stuff, not something like this that creates a new screening. So that was really cool. And I look forward continuing my partnership with you guys moving forward. I'll throw my email in the chat. So if anyone wants to contact me after this and talk about what they're doing, more than welcome to.
Fantastic. Jeff, thank you. That information, and I will say this, as I've said before, we wouldn't be here without you and your organization, without Jenny, Kate, and everything you've done. So thank you for that. To be the first state in the United States to have mandatory screening for G6PD is a phenomenal achievement. And I'm not patting us on the back. We would be nowhere without Jeff and his organization. So thank you again.
It was a pleasure.
And I am now delighted to turn it over to Niloufer, who is going to speak about something that I think is incredibly critical as this testing goes forward, because we need to help each other. That's the reason why we wanted to host this webinar. It's so important that you know that we are here to help. And the best way we can do that is to create a network, which Niloufer knows integrally from all of the work she's done before this, outside of the G6PD realm and in the G6PD realm. So if I may turn it over to you, Niloufar, we're delighted to hear your presentation.
Sure. Thank you so much, Regina. And hi, everyone. So I just want to start off with a little bit of a backstory about myself as a G6PD individual. Like Regina said, I am a change management leader in a fintech firm in the US called Fiserv. And I just love driving change and transformation. And I'm a G6PD individual. My son is G6PD deficient. My dad is G6PD deficient. And the reason I know that is, and I knew it from a very young age, is because my dad reacted badly to some medication because of his G6PD status, and they tested him for it. So we've always been careful. And in fact, I have a good story to share. When I was pregnant with my son, I had a doctor in India, he was born in India, who was advocating for newborn screening. And he was my son's neonatologist. And my son did get jaundiced in the first few days of his life, and he was treated phenomenally well. And he is a very happy and healthy child today. And I wish I could say the same for a lot of people that I've come in touch with, which unfortunately have not had the same outcome because doctors were not familiar with the deficiency, and newborns were not tested for the deficiency either. Next slide, please. So I'm so happy. I've been with Keely. I've met Keely and her team for a while now. And during COVID, I decided, as a concerned mom, I Googled and checked to see what are the implications of G6PD with this new virus that is taking a storm around the world. And I did find a research paper that spoke about G6PD deficient individuals being more susceptible to an earlier version of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And that was a paper that had come out from Hong Kong, and I started getting very concerned. I got even more concerned when there was nationwide talk about hydroxychloroquine and the use of certain medication, because I'm very well aware that certain medicines do not work for the G6PD deficient population. And the only thing I used to be concerned about earlier is when a doctor gives me a medication, I check for it in my to avoid list, and I would stay away from certain food. And I've, had no issues so far in my life with the deficiency. But with the, with the knowledge of hydroxychloroquine being promoted as one of the drugs early on during COVID, I got very, very concerned because I knew that there's a huge population. G6PD impacts almost 400 million people on Earth, and most folks are not aware of their status. So just think of the volume of the pandemic and the impact this decision might have had on a huge population around the world. So I started a petition to bring more awareness. And through the petition, I actually met a fantastic group of people who were thinking in the same way. In fact, through the petition, I reached Keely, and Keely had already worked, she had already started working with the government agencies and the NIH to start talking about COVID and G6PD. So we formed a team, and we decided that we wanted to bring, we were all bound by a common vision and objective to bring more awareness about G6PD deficiency during the pandemic. And as you can see to the right, this is a part of the team that we put together. And, as one of the members from Europe, this was a global team. One of the members from Europe said, we are creating ripples to form a wave. And I think that's exactly what we did. We did work with NIH on a survey. We had multiple webinars with Dr. Anwar that can be found on YouTube about G6PD. 2 of our members have published papers on G6PD and COVID, and we wrote an open letter to WHO. We're still waiting for an answer from them, but we started moving forward and tried to create an impact as much as possible. If you want to move to the next slide. So why is that relevant today? I think, and this is a Tough Mudder. I don't know how many of you have done the Tough Mudder, but I love it. And I love it because it's all about strangers helping strangers. And if you look at this, some of the obstacles in the Tough Mudder race that you see on the left, it just cannot happen if you do not get help from another individual. And I also like this saying from Helen Keller that alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. And I find that so true. I also found that with the G6PD COVID task force that we had put together, that coming together, solving for a common vision, helping each other out in terms of how we can make a difference, and just giving each other the confidence boost that we needed, that we wouldn't have been able to do it if we were alone. I think that's what really made a difference. And that's what we look for in the newborn screening task force or committee that we are putting together. So the newborn screening task force is basically taking the idea from the previous task force that we had on COVID to look at creating a committee of passionate individuals who want to make a difference in terms of how G6PD is managed in the USA. And I keep telling Keely that she should set her sights high. It should be not just USA, but it should be global, because there's so many people, when you start coming in touch with other individuals, there's so many people around the globe that are unfortunately adversely impacted by the deficiency only because they were not aware. And that's created havoc in their lives, that's created havoc with their kids. And I wish that we could do things differently that can save a lot of lives, like Jeff mentioned as well. So can we move forward to the next slide? So what is the task force about? And I have got a few inquiries already because I've been speaking to folks about the task force and the thought process around it. The task force is basically a group of individuals that want to drive making newborn screening for G6PD mandatory for their state of residence. We will be governed by a common shared vision and a set of guiding principles. But we are all independent individuals that are bound by a common vision and a common passion to make a difference. We have the support of Keely, we have the support of Jeff, and I think together with their knowledge and success in the state of New York, I believe we will truly be able to make a difference going forward. And the task force will meet regularly to brainstorm in terms of what can be done, share ideas in terms of what you're doing for your state, building out common content and messaging. For example, one of the small contributions we made to the New York State bill was we did sign a letter from the COVID task force as well that spoke about why newborn screening should be so important. And it would be so much easier if we reached out to the same set to our network of medical practitioners to be able to support multiple states at the same time as well. And we need to learn all that and find out if that would work, which I'm hoping will help with engaging with the advocacy firm as well, like Millennial. And the idea is just to come, learn, leverage, and support each other to make this a reality for your state. If you are interested, which I hope you are, please reach out. We've created a new URL, which is 49togo@g6pdtaskforce.org. And I'd say that again, g6pddtaskforce.org, double D there. And please reach out to us for more information. I'm more than happy to get connected and to actually make this a reality. I am so proud of Keely and her organization and Jeff and the work they've done for New York. And I really hope that we can, this is just the start. This is just the beginning. Can we move to the next slide, please? So I want to leave you with this. So while I was trying to look for quotes, and I looked at the Helen Keller quote actually, which I really like. I use it in my other change initiatives as well. I found this one, which I thought was very, very relevant and so true. And it says, optimism is the faith that leads to achievement. And I think to today, that is what I want to leave you with. There is optimism, and it's not just optimism. There is optimism and success that has already been seen in the state of New York. And I'm really hoping that we can come together and drive this forward for our states and make this a reality. And the more states that make this a norm, the easier it's going to be to get this done at the national level as well. So I leave you all with that and look forward to working with all of you. Thanks so much.
Niloufar, thank you so much. It's critically important to understand how to network across a state and across the nation, which is what you've been able to do. Actually, yours has gone worldwide, which is a phenomenon that I think we all find amazing, but understand that there are so many mechanisms now that to which you can speak that have allowed for that kind of communication that 20 years ago was just simply impossible. Simply impossible. I do want to, we have now is the question and answer section. And if anybody in the audience has any questions that they'd like to pose of our panelists, I'd be delighted to take them. If you want to bring them into the chat, you can just type them in. But in the meantime, I have a couple of questions that I'm going to ask the panelists. Please feel free though, because if you're seeing my eyes go back and forth, it's because I'm looking to make sure that if any questions come up. I did want to make clear that I'd like you all to take a look in the chat as well. If you need to connect with Niloufar, I'm going to ask you to put that email that you just had into the chat. Jeff's email is in the chat right now at jeffgio@millennialstrat.com. So please take a look. That'll connect you. Forgive me, I had a little itch. That'll connect you to Jeff and get you to his website. And then Niloufar, I think, also has put hers in. I love it. 4:49 to go at G6PD Task Force. I have the first question, and this is coming from the Philippines. What is the best approach on how to tell my son he has G6PD? I might have to turn that over to those who have that experience. What is the best way? Niloufar, I know this is really in your wheelhouse.
So, the way we look at G6PD in our household is it's just every individual on earth is unique and is born with a certain set of, certain chemical composition, which actually works for you. So G6PD is an evolutionary mechanism to protect from malaria. And that's why the enzyme deficiency sort of from an evolutionary standpoint happened. So my son has always known he's G6PD deficient. There was no breaking the news to him. It's like ever since he can remember, he's not supposed to have the color blue. He's not supposed to eat a few items. I have not been as strict as I would have been had I known more about G6PD before the global task force. But I don't see this as something that anyone has to be too concerned about, as long as you can adjust your lifestyle for this deficiency. And what I mean by that is I always grew up, I always participated in sports. I was like just a normal, healthy individual in my mind, at least. And I'm deficient as well. And I just knew to avoid certain medication. And I would always go back to the avoid list to check for it. And I knew to avoid some amount of food. I was not very good at it, but I did avoid as much as I could, try and keep away from some food items. And that's about it. And my son knows that as well. And the only thing I would say, and also something that I think during our task force, one of the doctors from Canada who was with us initially had suggested, is always mention it on all your medical papers and listed as an, I think she said, Keely, you might remember better, but listed as an allergy. Was that what she told us? As allergic reactions, because that's what the nurses look out for if you're in the ER. So I always tell my son to let people know that he's deficient. I always put it in all his school medical papers, and we're always checking any new drug that is being administered before we administer it. And that's it. Like, there's nothing more. It's not a big deal at all in my household. And
So
it should not be. It should
Right.
not be a big deal. It's just the sad fact that people don't know and therefore get impacted by it.
So by telling his son, then it's not a stigma. It's just a thing. It's just another part of life. It's basically what you're saying, if I understand you correctly.
Yes, and my son's interpretation of it, one day he came back to me and said, hey, you know what? I think I have superpowers. Like, I'm G6PD deficient. And I get protection from malaria. There are recent studies that talk about protection from cancer as well. So he's learning genetics in school. So he came back and said, I think I'm a little bit of superhero in me. So that's about it. That's as casual as it gets in my household.
That's fantastic. It's a great way to present it too, that there's no stigma attached to it. It's just another part of you, right? Another facet of you. We do have another question that's a little bit more food specific. So Keely and Niloufer, this may be to you. The question is from Natalie, and she wants to know what nuts are safe to eat. And I know we do have some lists up on the website, Natalie, in case you go to our G6PD Deficiency Foundation, but I am going to ask both Niloufer and Keely if they have any specific answers to what nuts to avoid, what you can eat.
From what I understand about nuts, it really has to be a legume. It's not like a walnut is not a legume. A chestnut is not a legume. You know, so a peanut happens to be a legume. So when they say nuts, you really have to think whether or not what family is it? And usually a nut from a tree that grows off a tree is usually pretty safe. They may be allergic to it for another reason, but for G6PD deficiency, you're usually okay.
And just as a G6PD mom, I recently learned, so I'm not the expert, I'm just an individual with the deficiency. I recently learned that anything in the Fabaceae family, that's fava beans and Fabaceae kind of sound similar, so that's easy for me to remember. That's the one that you look out for. And those are the ones that would have a compound called viceins. And viceins are the ones that cause problems for the deficiency. And fava beans just happen to have a high content of viceins. And I must say, I give credit to all the G6PD forums on Facebook that I've been part of. There's so much to learn from there. And I've learned this from one of my friends who runs another G6PD forum.
Amazing. It's the food for everybody who is in attendance. We do try at the G6PD Deficiency Foundation website to give a list of things so that you can continue to see what the research is supporting is safe. We have a nutritionist on our panel, on our board, who is G6PD deficient. And so she speaks directly to this and tries to give things that are good, things that are, she's got a red, yellow, and green list. So that if you get a chance to take a look at that, that might help guide you. Jeff, there's a question that I think that should come to you, and it has to do with when you're going to the assembly members. We were talking about approaching, and what you did was approach the health committee. Is that the recommendation when you're in different states? Is it recommended to try and find points of contact on the specific health committee for their assembly and their Senate, or is there some other location or some other group they should approach?
Yeah, well, every state is a forensic exercise into itself. I mean, some states, like the bigger industrial states, New York, California, Illinois, they're in session for most of the year, or at least more than half of the year. And some states, Connecticut, for example, they're in session for a few weeks out of the year. And so as a result of that, the committee processes are a little bit different. But usually there's almost always a committee that deals with health, public health, something like that. And that's usually the way to go to get started. But like You have to do like a forensic dive into that state to get a sense of, one, what committee we're going to start in, and two, what existing state law says and how it can be changed. So like before you start talking to anybody, like you have to have a blueprint laid out of who we're going to talk to, what we're going to talk about, and most specifically, we're going to ask for the law, for X law, to be changed from Y to Z. Because if you don't do that, you're not going to be taken seriously.
There's a follow-up question that's come from our audience. What kind of time, if you can project this, what kind of time is required to get a bill in front of Congress? Like how much time for this one? Do you think this was a standard amount of time that we worked on this to get it? I guess that's maybe you can present.
I think, well, I mean, like speaking specific to state legislatures, not to the federal level, right? I think like folks should be prepared for around a 2-year process to try to get something like this done, which is about what we faced. Sometimes these things move incredibly quick, and sometimes they can take much longer. Like this is not something that should be partisan in any way, and often it's partisan politics that can slow things down. Depending on what party controls things, there are certain issues that just move better in state legislatures. This shouldn't be one of those. So you should probably be looking at a similar timeline for adoption. But again, every state is a forensic exercise unto itself, and there's a ton of mitigating factors out there that can change what those timelines ultimately are.
The follow-up question is, do you recommend people take on more than one state at a time? Interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's all a matter of time and resources, right? Like there are like one thing that is true about state bills, and like you see this with some of the really high-profile issues dealing with health and immigration and other things, is that oftentimes states love to copycat each other. And that when one successful thing happens, other states, are like, oh, okay, well, we are socioeconomically somewhat like that state. Let's do that too. And so, and also, like it is easier sometimes to move bills in some of your smaller states that have shorter sessions. So it really depends. Like for example, if you're someone who lives in Connecticut or Massachusetts, yeah, maybe it makes sense to do some work in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Maine at the same time. But like I certainly wouldn't task anyone with trying to figure out Texas and Florida, or something along those lines.
But you're basically saying the benefit here, if I understand you correctly, the benefit here is to have a state that, like New York, if you have one that's aligned with, I guess I might have to take a step back, because I think what you found is that this wasn't partisan. And that is one of the biggest selling points, because Niloufar, as you said, we've got 400 million people who are affected by this. It's only going to grow because the population is growing. So take that not as a static number. And when you tell people what happens when they don't understand, you have a critical mass moment with a G6PD deficient patient, then it sells. I did one follow-up question. How big was the money? No, that seems to be a big point when you're going before congressional committees. How much does that evaluation of the cost benefit analysis help?
Oh, it helped tremendously. I mean, we had to get this bill through the New York State Senate Finance Committee. Like their job is to scrutinize the fiscal impact of legislation. And so if we had not performed the forensic analysis that clearly indicated that the price per test was going to be lower than the price of like one uninsured child being burdened with some of the terrible side effects of G6PD deficiency, that really sold it for us. So like having your numbers and your data is really important. We were able to rely on a huge network of folks within the pediatric space to be able to help us with that. And that's why the work that Niloufar is doing is so important, because like every state needs that network of people to be able to deliver those kinds of results.
And this goes to all of you, I think, do you have to be a resident of a state to to push for the state to pass that kind of legislation for there to be testing, G6PD newborn testing in that state?
I would go with no. I mean, look, I'm a hired gun. We go to whatever state we're told to go to. But when it comes to like constituents pushing for this kind of thing, I think it's more important that your validators are from your state than the fact that you personally reside there, right? Like if you're living in New York and you want to work on this in Florida, that's all well and good, but you have to make sure that you can get 20, 30 letters of support from folks in Florida saying this is good for the people of Florida. And that's key. Like it's always helpful to be able to tell a legislator that you're a constituent of theirs in some way. That's definitely good, but not necessary.
And I know we're getting close to the end of time. I know every time we have these great discussions, more questions come up, but there's a real critical question that was just asked. Can the template, what was utilized in New York, what we did, our path, be used as a template in other states?
100%.
So utilizing, to the extent that our audience wants to know more about that, please reach out to any of us. You have Jeff's email. You have Niloufer's contact information, her email. Keely and I can be reached at the G6PD Deficiency Foundation website. Our emails are there, and we have a general email box. We are checking email all the time. We'd be delighted to work with you, to direct you, to tell you what we did, to talk about our experiences. When we talked to the Department of Health, when Jeff got us in front of Assemblyman Gottfried, when we spoke to other individuals, and how we did it through COVID, which is another crazy, amazing thing. But it got accomplished in the state of New York, where they say nothing gets done. Well, that's not true. This got accomplished. So I must say it's been a delight to have the panelists here. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Niloufer. Thank you, Keely. Thank you for all the people in the background who made this happen. And thank you to all of our attendees. We really are delighted that we got a chance to present this to you, and we hope to hear from you. However you'd like to contact us, please let us know what we can do to help you, and we hope you'll be joining us, because we are going to continue this push. We're going from New York to all the rest of your states, and we're going nationwide if we can. If we can get that on the RUSP, right, and get that pushed, then we'll all be together having nationwide testing. So thanks very much. It's been delightful having you all here, and I hope you have a good evening.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.